let's talk about shadows and how you can use shadows to greatly improve your iPhone photos. Now, the interesting thing about shadows is that it's something that the human eye naturally doesn't really look at. So when you're walking around on a sunny day like this, there are going to be strong shadows all around you. But unless you're a photographer and unless you've trained your eye to pay attention to these shadows, you're just not going to see them. But if you find a way to incorporate these shadows in your photos, they can turn out really, really great. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my favorite tips and techniques for capturing incredible shadow photos with your iPhone. But before we even begin shooting, let's talk about the conditions we have today. Right now we're shooting this at noon, so this is the middle of the day, and it's a bright sunny day. The later in the afternoon you shoot, the longer those shadows are going to get. But in the middle of the day is when you have the most contrast. You have harsh shadows and bright highlights, and the contrast between these can result in some really special photos. Now by default, the iPhone, especially the latest iPhone models, shoots HDR photos. And HDR stands for High Dynamic Range, meaning that there's not going to be a big difference between the highlights and the shadows. That is literally the purpose of HDR. It is to eliminate those dark shadows and eliminate those bright highlights so you can get a more balanced exposure. But that's not what I want if my goal is to capture those dark shadows. So to fix this, I'm going to go into the settings of my iPhone. I'm going to scroll down all the way to camera settings. Here, I'm going to scroll down once again, and the first thing I want to do is disable that Smart HDR. With Smart HDR off, I'll now have the HDR icon directly in the camera app of my iPhone, and I'll be able to toggle HDR on and off depending on the needs of the situation. And while we're here in the settings, another thing I'd like to change is actually under the Preserve Settings sections. And here, you'll see a toggle for exposure adjustment. I'm going to enable it. With the exposure adjustment enabled, whatever changes I make to the value of my exposure slider are going to be preserved. And that's going to make today's shoot more convenient, because we'll be shooting a lot of photos with the exposure slider at negative values. So I've opened the camera app of my iPhone, and if you look at the viewfinder, you'll see that I'm at my 2x view, which allows me to get closer. And also, you're going to see that huge shadow that's entering my frame from the left-hand side. And what's also happening here is that this is a pretty busy place, and that's actually working in my favor, because it means that there will be a constant stream of people walking through the frame. So those people are going to be the subjects of my photo. Now, before I start shooting, there are just a couple of things I need to change here in the camera app. Now, the first thing I want to do is tap that HDR icon at the top right, and you'll see that HDR is now crossed out. So HDR is off, which means I'm going to get a bigger difference between the highlights and the shadows, and that's what I want for a shot like this. Next up, I'd like to adjust exposure compensation. So at the top left-hand corner, you'll see the exposure slider, which says 0.0 right now. So if I tap my finger there, the exposure slider comes up. So what I'm going to do is adjust that exposure compensation down, and I want to go pretty low, but I don't want to overdo this. My goal is to capture the kind of shots where the shadow is really dark, but I don't want to make it completely black. If it's completely black, then all the details there will be gone, and I will not be able to use them later on if I decide to do so in editing. Now that we have the settings in place, I'm ready to start shooting. I'll probably be shooting using burst mode to make sure I get that exact right moment. And also, I'm looking to capture the kind of shot where my subject is going to be pretty much where that shadow and the highlights meet. I think that could result in a really interesting photo. Now, one thing you're going to notice is that this shadow is actually not standing still. As I'm staying here and as I'm taking photos, the sun is actually making its way across the horizon like this. And as that is happening, this shadow that's right in front of me, it's kind of getting longer. It's moving more to the right side. So the timing is critical here. But if you find a spot that works, stay there. Stay there until you get that perfect shot, or until there's no more light or no more people. Because a great shadow spot is precious, and it can be quite difficult to find them. All right, someone's coming. I kind of missed that, so I'm gonna have to try to do this again. So I've captured quite a few already, but I don't think I've had the one I was looking for. And in street photography, generally speaking, you'll be taking hundreds of photos to just get one great image, and that is to be expected. So I just need one person, and I need that one person perfectly positioned in the frame, which is pretty much what I have in front of me right now. And I think we got the shot I was looking for. Now, if you look at this image, it turned out exactly the way I envisioned. We have that shadow going diagonally across the frame, which makes for really powerful geometry, and it really draws attention to the line where the shadow and the highlights separate from each other. And right at that spot, I have my subject. And if you look at the light here in this photo, you're going to see that my subject is brightly illuminated. And to make this better, she's also wearing extremely bright clothes, which just make her stand out so much more in this mostly monochrome scene of just dark and bright. And in general, if your goal is to draw as much attention as possible to the subject of your photos, a great way to do that is to brightly illuminate your subject and position them against the shadow in the background. So while we have that midday sun, those harsh shadows and those bright highlights, there are going to be more opportunities like this. So let's keep exploring and let's see what else we can come up with. All right, I didn't have to walk far at all to find my next location. You don't necessarily need a beautiful place. You just need the right kind of light. And if you can use that light in your photos, that often works out really well. So once again, I'm gonna frame up the shot, but this time I'm gonna do something else. I love using the exposure compensation slider to adjust the exposure in these shadow shots. But unfortunately, a lot of the older iPhones don't have that functionality. So what I can do instead is tap and hold my finger on the brightest parts of that wall until those letters AE, AF lock come up. And now I can use the sun icon that's next to the focus rectangle, and I can further decrease exposure to make that shadow darker. But I think this is really a vertical spot, because as those people are walking through this frame, they're vertical, and that shadow line is more vertical than horizontal. And I'm gonna see if I can also use that point where the line breaks as a part of my composition. And I think this shot really worked out the way I wanted. You'll see that the lady who's entering the frame from the left-hand side, she has more space in front of her, so that's good in terms of composition. And because those clothes are so brightly colored, and because they're illuminated, they really stand out against that dark shadow in the background. I also like the fact that I can see that point where that line breaks. So all these things come together in the shot, and I think that's why it works so well. Okay, I've found another spot, and this time we kind of have this triangle or this wedge of light. So the sun is above me, and we have the staircase that's kind of leading us down. Now, I'm going to be shooting vertical with my 1x view, and I'm going to use the exposure compensation slider again. So I want to really emphasize those shadows, and at this location, it looks like I need a stronger value. So I'm going to go with something like minus 1.7 for the exposure compensation. And when someone walks through the frame, I'll be taking a shot like this. Now take a look at this shot. I think it turned out exactly the way I wanted. You'll see that we have this strong wedge that's leading the attention of the viewer towards that bottom right-hand corner. But on top of that, we have this silhouette of a man, and that wedge is perfectly surrounding the man. so that all the attention goes towards the main subject. But now, let's see what else we can find. So right now, it's later in the afternoon, and that sun is making its way more and more to the right, but also it's going lower as this is happening. And to me, this means two things. One, as the sun starts to go lower and lower towards the afternoon, the contrast between the highlights and shadows is no longer as strong. However, this is still a good time to do shadow photography, just the difference between the highlights and shadows won't be as pronounced in and of itself. The second thing that's happening later in the afternoon is that all the shadows start to get longer. So if you look at my own shadow right here, it is now longer than it was at the start of the video, which was recorded in the middle of the day. Now, if you look at that wall opposite of me, there's something really interesting going on there. Essentially, the sun is currently parallel to the street. So the street goes that way, and the sun is shining from that way too. And that means that we have some really interesting shadows that kind of look like triangles on that wall opposite of me. So those corners right above the entrance of this building are casting that triangle-like shadow in front of me. And that is already a really powerful spot for street photography. Now, what else is going on here is that the pavement opposite of me is illuminated. And if a person walks past me, they're going to cast their own shadow on that pavement. So this time I can create a kind of shot where we don't just have an interesting shadow formation on that wall opposite of me, but there's also going to be a shadow on the pavement. So I can combine two shadows in the same shot. So for this shot, my HDR is still turned off and my exposure compensation is still at -1.7. And I want to keep it that way because these values are really going to emphasize these shadows. It looks like someone's coming in from the left. So I'm going to take a whole bunch of photos using burst mode. Okay, now take a look at this image. We have this girl coming in from the left-hand side and she's wearing white. So that white is sunlit and it stands out against the dark shadow behind her. So in this image, we have two really powerful areas. We have the bottom right-hand corner where the two shadows meet. And then at top left, we have the girl who's the subject of this image. And these two spots are aligned diagonally in the frame. And that just happens to look really, really nice here. But now, there's one last thing I want to share with you. So let's keep moving. So far, we've captured a lot of shots where a subject was illuminated and where they stood out against the dark background. And we've also captured some photos where a subject is in the shadow and then those subjects who are dark stand out against the brighter background. And both of those options work really great. But one thing we haven't yet tried is just taking a photo of the shadow of a person. So for this demonstration, we've come to the Dome Square, which is the biggest open space in the old town of Riga. And the reason I picked this spot is twofold. Number one, there are a lot of people here, and that means a lot of shadows. And number two, the square has these beautiful cobblestones, and those cobblestones are going to give a nice texture against which those shadows are going to stand out. So late afternoon is the perfect time for this kind of photography. So what I'm going to do now is open up my camera app. I'm still at that -1.7 for exposure compensation, and I'm simply going to walk around the square and look for shadows. And whenever I see an interesting shadow, I'm going to take a photo. But these shadows won't work because they're overlapping. So once again, if I have two people and if the shadows overlap, it just creates a messy shot. Nothing really stands out there, so that doesn't work for me. I need either one person, or if I have multiple people, they cannot be overlapping in ways that just don't look right. So I gotta keep looking here. Okay, so there's a man coming in from the right, so I'm gonna get just a little bit closer, a little higher, and I'm trying to frame it up in such a way where I have the entire shadow in, and I want to keep just a bit of the feet of the man, just like this. Now this photo right here really turned out the way I hope. If you look at how that shadow is positioned in the frame, you'll see that it goes diagonally from top right to the bottom left, and it fills the frame nicely. So as a photographer, I'm responsible for that entire frame, the whole composition. And my subject here is the shadow of the person, and it just happens to fill pretty much the entire picture with about even spacing on all sides. And that works out really good in terms of how that shadow is framed in this image. I also like the fact that I can see the 2 feet of the man. I think that adds more interest, more mystery to the shot. That's a really unique, really unusual perspective. I think it works really great for this photo. All right, that was a lot of shadows for one day, I know. But the reason I wanted to show you so many examples was to inspire you to seek out shadows in your own photography. Because these shadows, if you use them correctly, they can really take your iPhone photos to the next level. So make sure you pay attention to these shadows, and make sure you darken the exposure so that those shadows stand out even more. And if you do that, you're guaranteed to get some truly incredible photos. This video was a free preview of my iPhone Photo Academy online course. In this course, you'll discover everything you need to know to take stunning photos with your iPhone. So if you'd like to take the kind of photos that will leave your friends and family speechless, please take a look at the full version of iPhone Photo Academy. You'll find a link in the description right next to this video. So click on that link right now, and I'll see you inside the full version of the course.